Hello everyone, welcome to an extended one of these what I've been watching type videos where I just kind of talk about a show that I've been watching that I found particularly interesting and would like to hear your thoughts on it. I, about 2 years ago, started a rewatch of The X-Files. I, of course, had watched The X-Files and enjoyed it. It was always a series that I really liked, but for some reason it was never a show that I went and restarted from episode 1 and rewatched the entire thing in order. I just had never done that. When I was going to watch The X-Files, I'd usually either go straight to a favorite episode or just pick at random a disc from any given season, or a laser disc or VHS or whatever, just to enjoy a little bit of The X-Files for the evening. I had never done a focused rewatch. And the other thing too was it wasn't where I picked, sometimes I'll pick a show, I'm like, I'm going to rewatch this show, and that's what I'm watching, and within a matter of months, even a show this size, maybe half a year at the most, I would have finished a rewatch. But this was kind of casual. I decided like 2 years ago, I'm going to start doing it while I was already doing other things and busy with other projects and in my free time watching other shows or whatever. Just over a long period of time, I want to do this, and it was an interesting experience doing it that way, and I think I enjoyed it more, spreading it out more that way. I feel like even just watching shows in general, I do like the episode once a week for new shows rather than the streaming thing, gives your brain time to really process what you watched, to analyze it, to really contemplate the media you consumed before immediately pushing to the next chapter, and gives some anticipation. So even though I had seen all these episodes minimum of once, some of them 20 times over the years, it still created a little bit more of that effect in this manner. And so I just wanted to briefly talk about my experience in rewatching the X-Files, not really go over the whole series and review it in a long, lengthy deep dive into the X-Files. This is more just, what was that experience like for me? Did my opinion change at all with certain things? And I'll talk a little bit more at length when I get to the event series, season 10 and then season 11, because those I'd actually not seen incomplete at all, because I don't really stream a whole lot, haven't had cable TV in well over a decade, so those are not ones that I saw until home releases. And part of the reason I wanted to do this was I had not yet seen season 11, and I was waiting until I finished my rewatch. So starting off with the first few seasons 1 and 2, and for me it really just re-solidified how these are my two favorite seasons 1 and 2. I like the tone, the sense of mystery, and it also, there's a lot more standout in the style of the X-Files. I'd prefer the X-Files gone through various phases in tone, and even within seasons there are the more comical episodes, there are the darker, more dramatic episodes, mythology episodes of a very different tone from a lot of the Creature of the Week type episodes. And I overall prefer the Creature of the Week type episodes, both the more dramatic and the more horror focused and the more comedic. They're all just different, but I prefer that to the overall mythology arc, because for me, in a lot of ways, the overarching mythology within the X-Files has some of the best build-up in television history, but not always the best payoff. And there's a lot of coming to conclusion, and then no, never mind, kind of twisting, retconning, that's not quite right, that's not really the truth, and building more off of that, and there's never a satisfying conclusion to a lot of the mythology stuff, and it just feels to me just not quite as interesting as in these first few seasons in particular. I really enjoyed the almost procedural cop show element, but with myths and legends and aliens and the mysterious, and exploring different elements of our world that are outside the standard scientific explanation. And I really enjoyed that, and I enjoyed in the first roughly 4 or 5 seasons in particular the build up to a lot of the mythology arc stuff, a lot of the questioning, a lot of the unanswered questions were more interesting than when we got answers, I feel like. And season 1 and 2 for me will just always be my favorites. Stories like the Laserdisc of some of my favorites back here, Squeeze and Tombs. Those two give you a great idea of what a lot of my favorite X-Styles stuff is, and that continues into seasons 3 and 4. And for me, I think these are, again, the rewatch. It again reaffirmed my belief that I feel like seasons 3 and 4 are probably the best seasons of the X-Files. Seasons 1 and 2 will always be my favorites. They have a lot of individual episodes that just have a lot of special memories for me, and I enjoy the tone, but I feel like they build up enough with the style storytelling within those 2 seasons, and the characters of Mulder and Scully were now had some background and history, a relationship, and everything was really solidified, I think really perfected in seasons 3 and 4. So even though 1 and 2 are my favorites, I think 3 and 4 are probably the series at its best, along with season 5 would be pretty close in there. Like I could see someone saying 5 just as good as 3 and 4, definitely understand that. I think really this is the peak X-Files in those years in Vancouver. And then following season 5, we have the first X-Files movie, Fight the Future, and that was really, that first movie is the transition point from one style of the X-Files filmed in British Columbia, the Canadian / Washington state type environments, and in those years, and a big tonal shift in a lot of the style storytelling. A lot changed after the movie when production was shifted down to California, to the Hollywood style filmmaking, a little bit different. Everything kind of changed, and that, to me, I remember my first watching was really the point where it became, alright, I love this show, to the later seasons, I just like this show. And that was a point where I was curious in my rewatch of how would I feel. The X-Files movie, I've always been mixed on Fight the Future. On one hand, I think it's fantastic, I really enjoy it, but it also just feels like a very big budget 2-part episode, and the fact that it is pretty much essential viewing. If you want to move from seasons 5 to 6, you have to watch this in between. And that's the funny thing with when I was watching the X-Files, I didn't see the movie in theaters, I didn't see it on VHS then for a little while later, so that was part of the negativity for me when I first was watching the X-Files, moving from seasons 5 to 6. I hadn't seen the movie in between, it was probably during season 6 maybe, I don't know exactly when I finally saw the movie and things clicked, it was much better, but I feel like in rewatching I enjoyed it more because it is so essential to bridge those seasons leading into season 6. And here's where things get a little more interesting. This is, some of my opinions on some of these later seasons have changed, and season 6, for the better. I'm much more positive with season 6 than I remembered, and it's not a season I went back to a whole lot. It is much lighter in tone, and there's a lot more of the comedic type episodes, and I think at first that transition was a little jarring from a lot of the kind of darker X-Files that I was enjoying from earlier seasons, but I actually find that I really enjoy a lot of the season 6 episodes and that change in tone for a lot of them, and I think it has some of the best, more lighthearted episodes, and there are a lot of really good character development moments for Mulder and Scully, so that is a season that I come away from my rewatch with a much more positive outlook. I think it has bridged that gap between being one of those seasons I just kind of like into being, I think now it's one of those seasons that I love. I think it is joined those first 5 seasons for me, even though it's very different, where I really like it. Then we move into 7 and 8, and 7 and 8, having a show where one of the 2 main characters is barely in it, and you have a kind of a replacement for him, and that really changes the dynamic of the whole thing, and how Scully is as a character, because her role kind of changes with her position with Agent Doggett. I really disliked these for the most part when it came out, but there were just these occasional moments that I enjoyed. And over the years, I have rewatched just kind of random episodes, and I've enjoyed season 7 and 8 more in that capacity over time. I really think that Agent Doggett is well crafted overall as a character, just someone very different, and it changes the entire dynamic of the show. But at the same time, I don't think it was bad. I think it was good overall, but not the same thing anymore. Not quite like that's the Mulder and Scully, that their relationship, those two characters, the way they work off each other was part of the heart of what made the series work. So not having that is missed, even though there were some great standout episodes individually in both of these seasons, and Agent Doggett was still good. But again, these are for me still in the rewatch the lesser seasons of the show. They just don't stand up, even though there are some individual episodes that are fantastic in their own right. As seasons, they're really just not as good. I think one thing in the rewatch that has changed for me a bit is that these would be on equal footing for me before when they first aired and just in the casual watching of random episodes over the years. But I think in the rewatch, I think I prefer season 8 a little bit over season 7. I think it edged it out. I think there's just some individual moments and episodes that make a little bit stronger of a season. And then we move in to season 9. And again, season 9, you have even less of the Mulder and Scully dynamic. And when your two leads are virtually missing and you're mostly following two new characters that just don't have, well, not new to the season, but new as in not those original two that you start off with in season 1, it just felt like a show that was on its last legs. It really did. And I think in rewatching, on the opposite of season 6, which I liked a lot more in rewatching, season 9 I was already kind of iffy on, my least favorite season. I think I like it even less after rewatching it. It just felt like a season where a show had gone on a season longer than it should have. There are, again, the occasional moments and episodes, but just even, it's not even as strong as season 7 or 8. It really is just a mediocre season of The X-Files. But the one thing I'll say is whenever we do get those moments with Mulder and Scully, those moments are fantastic, and I do like the conclusion overall. It wasn't perfect, but as a conclusion at the time, kind of for the series, it was pretty good. Not one of my favorite series finales of all time, but still a solid enough ending, and as far as the quality of season 9, I thought better than the overall quality of the season, and the ending was satisfactory. But overall, yeah, season 9 I like even less in rewatching than I did initially, and it was already my least favorite, so just not great. And season 6 I like more. 7 and 8 I think overall are a little underrated, but still not as strong as those initial seasons. And then after years of being in development, we finally got a second X-Files movie, I Want to Believe, and this was, even from when it initially was first in theaters, disappointing. It's not bad. It was nice to see those characters again and see them in what again felt like sort of a more of a Monster of the Week type episode, and the general feeling, the style was much more in line with a lot of the type of X-Files that I like the most, but at the same time it just felt like an extended version of a script of a random episode from a season of the X-Files. It didn't have quite that big movie feel that I was hoping that it would have, and my opinion has never really wavered on this, where it's just okay. I've never disliked it, but I've never been over the moon enjoyed this thing. It was just okay. It was a decent X-Files episode, really, with a bigger budget and extended runtime, and I enjoy it for what it is, but it always felt like this kind of unnecessary little loose end after the end of the actual series. Then, many years later, we get the event series. The X-Files returns for a 10th season. This little 6-episode return to the X-Files years later was something I was anticipating, but was worried about a little bit. It was a little bit of a cautious anticipation, because you never know after that much time bringing something back. Will it spoil the little bit of good that was in the end of season 9, or will it give a more satisfactory conclusion? Will it, bring the X-Files back into form? And the event series was one that I had randomly caught a couple of episodes of and had not seen in full, and then I grabbed season 10 and 11 once that came out on physical media, and that's eventually when I started my rewatch, and I was going to hold off and watching those. And my initial thought and my initial reaction to those few episodes that I had seen before was not, I wouldn't say negative, but disappointed. And in rewatching the event series, I still feel that way. Overall, it felt like an almost unnecessary return, but it had enough moments in it that were redeeming, especially in the few episodes that were not necessarily as wide of a part of the mythology arc, the My Struggle episodes that bookended it. Some of those in between felt like closer to a return to form. It felt like it was a little bit truer to the dynamic, like David Duchovny and Gillian Anderson had kind of refound those characters a little more strongly, and the parts of their relationships that I loved. Like, that's really what I love, is the dynamic of these two characters and who they are as people, and seeing the evolution of those characters over the many years, and how their lives change, how they respond to events, and seeing them in those individual moments, and the great chemistry that they have is what really is one thing that kind of kept me coming back, as much as the mystery of everything. And I feel like some of those in between episodes, those moments really captured that, but the larger mythology arc type stuff within this event series felt like it was trying to capture the moment within the types of conspiracy stuff they were tackling, but at the same time it felt like a lot of unnecessary retconning and downplaying a lot of the payoff that was successful in the later seasons. Even though those seasons were not as successful, there were some payoff things, some conclusion elements that worked, and I feel like this kind of unraveled a lot of those in an unsatisfactory way. And I didn't like where they were going with William, and the idea in the first episode Mulder and Scully were only kind of together and a little separated. There were just things in it that, no. So it was very mixed. It was one of those where if I put these 6 episodes up against any random 6 episodes of season 9, I might like it a little bit more than that season, just because of the good that was in this. Episodes like Mulder and Scully meet the Weremonster. Like, there are just some things in this season, and even in those wider mythology arc type elements, there are some great moments of acting and interest in some of the investigation that I feel like it is a little bit better than season 9 in that capacity, but it's only 6 episodes, and so overall it's kind of on par with my least favorite season of the original run of the show. So a little disappointing. So I was elated when I liked season 11 a lot more. It felt like this was so much closer to what I wanted season 10 to be. This was much more of a return to form. Sadly, again, the continuation of the My Struggle series, the greater, wider mythology arc, again left me feeling a little dissatisfied. I disagree with a lot of the choices that were made, but it's just personal. I can't say that it was particularly bad storytelling. It just didn't appeal to where I wanted that wider story arc to go, and it just didn't line up with the original 9 seasons as well as I wanted it to. And I didn't like the conclusion. It was left a little bit open-ended in some elements, and there were a lot of choices made in that wider mythology element, the big picture element of the season, that were not where I would want them to be, and I didn't enjoy quite as much, even though they had many very wonderfully played out poignant moments between Mulder and Scully, better than in the event series. So the two of them and their characters sold me a bit more on the stuff I disliked within it. But this is, a longer season, thankfully, and allows for an even greater sense of variety from season 10 and those more standalone episodes, even when they tie in a bit to the larger story arc, especially in particular with William. A lot of those individual, more standalone things felt closer to a return to form. There are actually a few episodes in here that felt a lot closer to those first 5 episodes of The X-Files. The X-Files I really loved, where I have no idea what the discourse is around 11. I've not really encountered, or even have never intentionally looked up any reviews or what people have said. But even though some of the wider mythology arc stuff I don't necessarily enjoy, on the whole, I think I would be absolutely a season 11 defender. I don't know if the general consensus is positive or negative, but for me, overall, there's enough good in this season that I think I genuinely enjoy this season. Season 11 had some moments that did what a lot of the season 10 tried to do in terms of tackling a lot of things that would be more current and on the public consciousness, and elements of conspiracy and the experience of technology in our everyday lives. It tackles those, I think, so much better and doesn't feel pandering in any sense. The unpronounceable 7th episode, RM9SBG93ZXJZ, where Mulder and Scully are at a completely AI-driven sushi restaurant, and the entire episode is about the prevalence of AI and technology-driven things within our daily lives. And that is, to me, honestly, might be one of my 10 favorite comedic episodes of the entire series. That's saying a lot. Like, it's up there with some of my absolute favorites as far as episodes that have a more comedic tone, and I felt like it captured a lot of my sentiment in regards to those elements of the modern world, and just, I loved it. I loved how much they played off each other with very little dialogue. It was very minimal dialogue in the episode, and so it was much more body language and just looks, and the way their chemistry and the way they acted off each other, Mulder and Scully, in this episode was brilliant, and I think it was one of the best examples of really feeling the history between those characters and their current state of their relationship, which I felt was much better handled in this season compared to 10. But that episode, I'll rewatch that one like 100 times. Like, I just, for some reason, that one just clicked with me. It tickled my funny bone. As well as the lost art of forehead sweat, where they tackled the Mandela effect. I just think the humorous parts of this season were on par with some of the best in the X-Files. It just really worked for me. And it wasn't only that, though. It also tackled some more serious content and something that was more of a mystery of the week type episode, something like Ghoulie, but then it also was a part of the larger mythology, and episodes like Kitten, where you got a little more of a history with Skinner, and those more serious dramatic elements, I think, played out well throughout the season for one that's only 10 episodes. And you have these episodes that have a town under duress because of witchcraft, and the unbelievably creepy evil Teletubbies kids show, kind of without spoiling too much. Hopefully, if you know watch these seasons, know what the heck I'm talking about. But there are things like that just feel like great classic X-Files fun. You know, season 11, I really enjoyed and was a breath of fresh air from season 10. And if this is all that we ever get, again, I feel like I don't like that the ending didn't quite include everything that it should have. But as a last season, I'm happy this exists. It's more closer to a return to form. It's much better than season 9. So season 10, it was kind of like, I don't know if it should have come back, even though I like some stuff in it. Season 11 was, I'm glad it came back for this short period of time, and I think gives a more satisfying final season than 9. So that concludes my rewatch of The X-Files, a show that I will rewatch for years to come. And I think season 11 and 6 are the two that for me will now kind of enter the rotation. You know, episodes from those seasons will probably pop up my rewatches now, along with those first 5 seasons. So those are two that I've really changed my opinion on 6 and really liked 11. So I'd love to hear what your experience with the X-Files is. If you've rewatched it, has your opinion changed with any of the seasons? You know, if you're someone who, like me, watched it when it was first on the air. And if you are a more recent viewer of the X-Files, like, let's say you just missed it back in the 90s or you're much younger, and you've only seen it in recent years, I'd love to hear there's maybe a different take on some of these seasons. Maybe you like season 7, 8, and 9 more than a lot of the people who originally watched the show did. So I'd love to hear your opinion on the X-Files.